I'm a hustler, baby.
It's time for Hustle Her podcast. I'm your host, Deshae Keynes. Hustle Her is all about inspiring women through real life experiences that have helped to mold and develop not only me, but my guests into the entrepreneurs and leaders we are today. If you're an enterprising woman determined to succeed and looking for a bit of motivation, a bit of tough love, and some actionable takeaways to be the best you, girl, you are in the right place. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Scooter Mart. At Scooter Mart, you can buy, sell, or rent a bike with them. Make sure you head over to their Hamilton location on Church Street or their Paget location on Lovers Lane, or visit them on www.scootermart.bm. Hey guys, and welcome back to Hustle Her podcast. As always, thank you for spending some time with me today. I really do appreciate it. Big shout out to our season sponsors, 59 Front and Brown & Company. Also, thank you to Scooter Mart for supporting this episode today. So, I am incredibly excited about my guest today. Not only is she my friend, but she is an advisor, she is a speaker, and she is an author of the amazing book, Begin Boldly, Miss Christie Hunter Arscott. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Deshae.
Yes, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yes.
Let's get started.
Let's go. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Christie has given us permission to have a very candid conversation, so we're excited about that.
One thing, actually, it relates to my research. I didn't even say that. I told Deshae that she can ask me anything and everything. We also have done zero prep for this.
None whatsoever.
We have not even done a call. I have no idea what she's going to ask. So that might be a testament to both of our schedules and lives.
Yes, exactly.
But it also means that it'll be real and raw and off the cuff.
And I love that.
In my research, I found that women and generally want to know the woman behind the bio. We don't want just the shiny, headshots and accolades. And this is where they went to school.
Yep.
And so I think that there's such a need for deeper conversation.
I totally agree. And I'm
thank
always
you for
happy.
what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm always happy when people allow that as well. Because sometimes people want to, kind of navigate the conversation from behind a lens a bit. And so when you're given carte blanche to kind of ask whatever in a very respectful way, like I tell people all the time, I'm not TMZ, like I'm not trying to break a story. So that is not what we're doing here. So I'm very happy about that. All right. So we're going to start with a few rapid fires and then we'll dig in.
Sure.
Cool. All right. I'm happiest when?
Ooh, can I give multiple?
Yes.
So one is definitely around my family.
Okay.
Which is, traditional, but very, very true for me. And the other is in, on, or under the water. I am truly, truly happiest by the sea, which is why I feel so lucky to live here.
I know. I love going by the water, especially when it's like a calm, flat day. It's like perfection.
And it makes you feel so small, like gives you such perspective on life.
Absolutely. Totally agree. All right. What is your biggest strength?
I would say one thing I definitely feel about myself is that I love interacting with people from all walks of life. I think Bermuda and my upbringing really contributed to that because you have this like mixed match of an amazing society all condensed into a smaller space. And just to build upon that, not just having a superficial level of conversation with people, like going deeper in those interactions with people.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, let's go a little lighter. Favorite color?
Like a turquoise sea color.
What gave it away? Okay. And tell me a little. Okay. No, I know it just passed and I think I know the answer, but who's your cut match team?
Somerset.
No, really? I'm excited. I would have assumed St. George's.
No, so she would know this, but I was born and raised in Somerset in Cavello Bay area at the bottom of Scotts Hill, and spent my entire childhood there. And now we live in St. George's, but I am diehard red and blue.
There we go. Christie.
My son went before he could talk, was in red and blue. Now he is, defected, but
No, see, they come out of you. You can't even trust them. Like that time of the year, you just can't do it.
Born in Somerset, living in St. George's.
All right. Okay. I'm pleasantly surprised. I was not expecting that answer, but that's okay. All right. Tell me about the perfect date night with your husband.
So we had a really great one last night, actually.
I love that.
And so I'll speak to that. We went out, well, these two individuals invited us over to their house, and they're both originally from abroad, amazing individual, completely different walks of life in their 70s.
I love that.
And one of them is Ramon's patient, then one of them's like a friend of a friend. And we had the most interesting conversations around life, marriage, relationship, family, pursuits of joy, adventure, physical fitness, health. And my husband and I originally connected because of our love of interacting with all people and all walks of life. And it's harder to carve that out. But those moments of like intergenerational friendships, wisdom sharing, sitting at a table together and asking questions with people over a meal. I'm pregnant. I would have preferred if I could have drank wine, but it's all good.
Okay.
But yeah, it was just beautiful. And I love those kind of moments.
Okay. I love that. And then finally, we're all about the skincare routines here ever since we had Olamide on the podcast. So tell me about how you keep that skin so great.
So this is actually one of my other passions.
Really?
So yes. So I always describe myself as multi-passionate. And actually, you don't know this about me, so it's a great question. So I help run the skincare side of Arscott Plastic Surgery.
Did not know that.
And so for almost 10 years, I've been researching medical grade skincare, attending the conferences, trained in it, bringing in and sourcing our products for a range of ethnicities and backgrounds and concerns, particularly looking at women's health and kind of the stages you go through from puberty to childbearing years to menopause and beyond, and how that waxes and wanes. And I actually was diagnosed with basal cell cancer when I was in my early 20s. And so I'm super passionate about sun protection. So that's a little bit, I was like, you got way more than you expected.
It's okay. I'm okay with that. I love that.
But we have this line that I absolutely love that's called Skin Better Science. And so I swear by it and really enjoy it. But my biggest thing for people is find a trusted provider who uses medicine and evidence to help you with your routine. And Sephora, you could go in there and I spend a lot of money in there still. But you could go in and be subject to marketing, and so many things matter. How things are, what container they're in. Are they oxidized? What kind of dropper they have? Are they exposed? What element? And we're so subject as women, they like prey on our fears around skin. So I would say less is more. Find someone to guide you through the different stages of life, the different seasons. So
absolutely. Because I'm telling you, what I used to do with my skin when I was in high school, early college, I could not do now. I'd break out in a heartbeat. Like, your skin evolves as you get older, and no one tells you about those things, which is kind of crazy.
So talking about that, when it's funny because like young me wouldn't have gone on this, show, 6.5 months pregnant, all of these things. And today I woke up and I was breaking out, and there were all of these different things going on. And you kind of learn that there's no perfect condition, perfect skin, perfect physical condition, perfect mindset. You're never ready. You just have to go do it. And so I think that's so important to know, but also know that there's no silver bullet for things in life. It's all an experiment, and at different stages, you're going to have to be trying different things.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
Yeah, I love that. All right, Christie. So let's take it back. Tell me about little Christie. What were you like as a child? What did you like to get into? Like, were you outspoken? Were you quiet? Fill me in, all the details.
Oh gosh, I feel like a mix of all of those things at different stages. I've always felt feelings very deeply.
Okay.
So, and I'm still like that. Like when I feel an emotion, like when I feel sadness or grief or love or distress about the state of the world, I feel it. And it is sometimes at some point all consuming. And as a child, I was also like that. I'm also someone that on top of being feeling is very analytical and like takes a step back and looks at interactions and the ways of the world. And I feel like I was also like that as a child. I was very aware from a young age of like in groups and out groups and who was being left out. And I feel like I had that awareness from the time I was like 7. I think I had a lot of, I think there was like that, I liked to use my voice, but a lot of, as I got older, particularly, I feel like 10 onwards, you start to get, or at least I did, this awareness of like things you should be self-conscious of or your own kind of barriers that you put up for yourself. And then you kind of take some of your 20s and 30s unworking that, which is part of the reason I wrote the book, is like, we all deal with those internal dialogues and questions and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I also loved to be by the sea. I loved art. A lot of the things that are still me. I loved, yeah.
Okay, so when I say little and little Christie, like, what did you like to do for fun as well? Like, were you into sports?
How old?
Okay, let's say 8.
So, 8, I loved art.
Okay.
And I put that on hold for a long time for other activities and pursuits. And I find that at this stage of my life, like, I'm delving into that so much more. And it's part of my passion for interiors and interior styling.
Okay.
Like, I did our practice, the medical practice. I've done our home, multiple other spaces. And like, that is almost like a form of artistic expression.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I love. I loved being outdoors, which I still do. And it's so interesting as you get older and you're researching and you're like, there's all of these studies around why walking outside in bare feet is grounding, or being by the ocean is this, or being in sunlight early in the morning. And I feel like from a young child, those were things that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed, and if we're looking a little bit further out, doing things in, on, or under the water. So one thing I did as a child was, my dad was big into free diving, lobstering, spearfishing, and we were fortunate enough to live on the water.
Yeah.
And I was big into public speaking and debating, I think from the time I was like 10 or 11. But it was amazing because there was this activity that brought complete silence and perspective in a world for me that was so, I guess, dominated by speech and ideas and debating. You know, you're 12 years old and they're telling you to debate, you know, apartheid, and they're telling you to debate euthanasia. And these are all really heavy topics for that age. And like, something about getting under the water and just testing yourself physically was really enlightening. The last thing I would say, I mean, you said, what did you do? I'll tell you what I didn't do. I was not good at sports. And I was severely asthmatic. And if you talk to the PE teachers at BHS, they'll still talk about me and my pump and being pulled to the side and them walking me to my mom's office and worried that something would happen. And so that was always a struggle for me. But over the years, I was really, really dedicated to like improving my fitness so that I could have better lung capacity, better lung control, all of these different aspects. And it's not the end all be all of asthma control, but one of the things I'm still proudest of is like when that little girl who couldn't run from her house to her neighbor's house can now, well, not at 6.5 months pregnant, but typically run further and, you know, invest in that. So that's something that was interesting in my childhood.
Absolutely. No, it's so interesting when you ask different people about the childhood and what activities they kind of got into. I love when people are like, I was very creative, right? And then it's almost always, I was creative, but I didn't play sports. Like, it's so weird how that happens sometimes. And just from doing the podcast, like, I've never done any, you know, significant research on it, but just with those, someone always says I was very creative, but I just was not into sports at all. That's like very, very, very consistent when it comes to that.
I think I would be into sports if I was capable. But let's be clear, I was clearly incapable. So.
Yes, the asthma took you out, and that's okay. It's nothing wrong with that at all, because I'm not creative at all, but I did play a few sports growing up, but that was it. I couldn't draw a straight line if I tried, but you know, it is what it is. All my, you know, the sip and painting things that people do, and mine are always awful. Like, I'm like, come just draw it on here and I'll just fill it in. Like, it's just too much after that. But when you think of like who you were as like a teenager and who you kind of what you wanted to do when you went to school, university, this Rhodes Scholar, and you went to Oxford, all of these amazing things, like, what would you say was like something that was pivotal in kind of shaping who you wanted to be career-wise in those formative teen years?
I don't think I knew who I wanted to be career-wise. And I actually like feel pretty strongly like we shouldn't ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, because I think it's puts so much pressure on a singular identity and a singular profession when the professions that they're going into with AI and all of these developments are going to look so much different. But then the other thing is like, we can have multifaceted lives and careers, and sometimes careers are an integral part of our identity in life and sometimes they're not. And I think it would be better to ask people who they want to be. Like, I think I knew I wanted to use my voice and the gifts that I'd been given, and I mean this in the broadest sense, like the ability to have an education, the ability to have mentors, great parents, like a community that supported me, exposure to different things for an impact on issues that I cared about. But I don't think I knew what that looked like. I don't think in my wildest dreams I could have imagined a career like I have now, ever. So I don't think I knew. No.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you about asking kids what they want to be. And my dad said to me when I was going into university, he was like, I think you should go in undecided. And he was like, because all of your life, 100%. Yeah. He was like, all of your life, people have told you because you're outspoken, you know, bossy, all the things girls that had strong personalities get labeled.
Aggressive.
All of those things that we now know are bad. Oh, you should be a lawyer because, okay, great. You speak whatever. He was like, I don't think you want to be a lawyer. He was like, I don't think that that's what you want to do. And he was like, I think you should go in undecided and kind of figure it out. And of course, I knew it all at 18. And I was like, how could you say that to me? Blah, blah, blah. And literally halfway through my degree, I was like, I do not want to be a lawyer. Like I was pretty adamant about it. And like I was working in a law firm on my internships. And I was just like, this is literally awful. And my mom I was like, I couldn't do this for the rest of my life. And my mom's an educator. So I wanted to change my major. She was like, well, you're over halfway through this degree, so you're probably going to need to do a double because you're not wasting my money. But literally, and when I changed my major, my dad was like, he just kind of looked at me and I was like, we're not even going to talk about it. But I wish I would have listened to him because I would have saved myself extra time because he was 1000% right. Like I've never, and I tell people that now and people kind of look at you like you're crazy. I'm like, if you're not sure, it's okay. You can figure it out, especially if you're going to school in the US. Like those first 2 years are just, you know, regular classes anyway, like prereqs. They're not like actually into whatever degree it is that you're doing.
I don't think you know till you try either. Like I remember being at this point of indecision after my grad school in Oxford and being like, I don't know what I want to pursue job wise. And you don't just suddenly like lick your finger, put it up and like, oh, I know. Like you don't know till you experiment and try. And that's a lot of the themes in the book. But same with me, Deshay. Like I was pegged to be a lawyer. I was a debater. I was on the national debate team. I was head girl. I was always speaking. I did politics in my undergrad. Like I cared about, you know, human rights issues and I tried different trajectories, you know, exploring and experimenting. And I came to the realization that this could have been an option, but this wasn't the option. And it's really important to think about how we instill the critical thinking skills in the next generation to really be curious and ask the hard questions. Is this what I want? Or is this society? What are they telling me what I should be?
No, I totally agree. I genuinely, my dad's probably like, if he watches this, he'll be laughing like I told you so. Like he'll say it now, but you know, you're absolutely right. And we had this stigma on girls growing up, especially in Bermuda. Like if you were outspoken and you know, did speech and debate or youth parliament or any of those types of things, we were all told to be lawyers. Like I can think of all of my closest friends, similar personalities, we're all told to be lawyers growing up. And it's just, I don't think any of us are, but it's just crazy that was what was, you know, put on all of us to just kind of do because you were outspoken at the time, just growing up.
But I think that's why, you know, Hustle Her and platforms like this are so important, because one thing I'm really passionate about is there's this saying, you cannot be what you cannot see, and aspirations directly linked to visibility. And I've shared this with people that I'm close with, and there's a lot of research around this. But if you see this model where it's like people that do debate, do politics, end up as lawyers, that's the only thing that you think is possible for you. But if you're like, gosh, you know, Deshay went into this work and is doing communications and podcasts and DEI work and inclusion and culture, and, you know, there may be another trajectory. Or, you know, Christie started in consulting with Deloitte and worked in the US and then, you know, was doing people and performance and then transitioned to a portfolio entrepreneurial career. And was an author. There's so many things where if you raise the visibility on these platforms, that little outspoken, bossy girl who's being labeled as one thing will start to question what else is possible for me.
Yeah, totally. And I'm so grateful for, like, we have definitely have mutual friends that did different things, you know, okay. And what we see now is that it's okay and you're successful in it. And you speak about it in the book about trying new things or whatever. Like no one's career trajectory is the same. That's the first thing. But then also trying new things is also, I would have never thought, one, that I'd be sitting here right now 10 years ago. And two, that I would be working in an insurance company, not doing insurance, but doing DEI work. Like it's crazy. Like I would have never thought that 10 years ago. But speaking of that, which was probably would have almost been 10 years ago now. I don't know if you remember this, but my first interaction with you was you were the speaker at, I think it was called Women in Finance at the time.
Yes.
And it was at the B&G.
Yep.
And you were the speaker there, and it was great. I remember the story you told about your husband and his birthday, the whole thing. And that was my first introduction with you. And then I was working somewhere at the time, and you came and you spoke there. And I remember thinking then that was my first real introduction to DEI. And I wonder, how was it in that space advocating for, I guess, women more so in a time when it isn't as prevalent as it has been in the past, like 4 years? Like, how difficult, or if anything, was it kind of being someone advocating for things that people just weren't talking about then?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, one thing was when I went to Brown, I did a lot of work on gender, sexuality, race, inclusion, and I found those interests kind of forming even more during that time. And then I got the Rhodes Scholarship to go to Oxford, and most Rhodes Scholars at the time had done law or medicine or, you know, those kind of trajectories. Yeah. And even in my Rhodes interview, one of the questions was, why not law? And in a room of many lawyers who were interviewing me. And I was like, I want to focus on women. And I was the second Rhodes Scholar ever in the entire world to do women's studies.
Wow.
And the program was only 10 years old. It was still fairly new at Oxford. And people, I even had a friend come up to me years later, and they were like, we heard you got the Rhodes Scholarship and you were going to do women's studies. And we were like, what's she going to do with that? And at the time, a newspaper article was written up about me. And it started with, most Rhodes Scholars go to Oxford to do medicine, law, and other like prestigious degrees, but Christie's going to do women's studies. Sheesh. And so I think your question's right on point, because at the time, particularly among, I think, my generation, people were like, Christie, why are you doing this? This is our mother's generation battle. Like if you look at the civil rights movements of the 60s and 70s, if you look at women's rights to vote, like all of those, like, why is this still an issue? And I don't think it was on the forefront of people's minds in the way that it is, or at least not my generation, in the way that it is now. The only silver lining of some of the atrocities we've seen politically and human rights wise worldwide has been that my focus and area of passion has become from a sideline issue to a mainline issue. So no one ever questions anymore why reproductive rights or why, you know, additional things like protections for children, for mothers, for, you know, women in the workforce are an issue. And so I think now there's that consciousness, but yeah, I did have to justify myself 100%.
But what was the driving, I guess, force behind wanting to be an advocate for women and learning about women's studies? Because I shouldn't say because. What? I just want to know. What was that?
So, I told this story on a podcast. When my book came out, someone asked me a similar question. And I shared this story. They were like, when did you first start to care about this? And I couldn't think. Like, I was like, I don't even remember. I just remember always caring about this. And then I thought long and hard, and I was like, you know what? I remember when it was. And I was around 11 years old, and my drama teacher at BHS came up to me and said, I think you should try out for our public speaking team. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And she said, go home and write a 3-minute speech and come in tomorrow and audition with everyone. And I said, okay. So at 11, 3 minutes. Wow, that's intense. So I went home, Somerset, and knocked on on the rectory door of my priest at the church. And I said, I want to interview you. And he's like, what? Christie, what are you doing here? Right. And he's like, okay, come into the church. So we went to the back, and I said to him, I want to know why women can't be priests in the Catholic Church. Ooh. And he looked at me and he said, okay, I'll walk you through like what the rationale is in the institution, but you know, then you can take that and do what you may. So I did research, and the next day I got in and I gave my speech on why women should be allowed to be priests in the Catholic Church. And it was funny because the other individuals who were trying out, they spoke about like their vacations, their favorite ice cream, their food. And here I was like this valiant feminist at 11. But I think I've always been aware of beyond women's social injustice. And I went back to that point, like around the age of 7, I remember thinking, why isn't this person invited to this birthday party? Why is this person isolated or sitting on their own? Why is this person someone that's like not in a certain group or clique at school? And I think it's that I wouldn't say I always cared about inclusion, but I was always triggered by exclusion. And that then led me to where I am.
Yeah. And most people don't realize is when people identify exclusion, they then want to be more inclusive.
Yes.
Right. And so I think it's spot on how inclusion works, because you don't just go into something. Well, now people do, because I think it's a bit more prevalent, like you said.
Yeah.
But previously people were definitely like, well, and obviously everyone in their different groups based on diversity makeups and whatever that kind of looks like. But exclusion was I think the genesis of why more people wanted to be included.
Yes, definitely. And I think we don't use that word enough. You're right. Like, but we all have our own experiences of exclusion. There is no way that with our intersectional identities, every single one of us have felt included in every single setting. And so all of us can relate to exclusion. And when you extrapolate that, it makes us more powerful as like catalysts for inclusion. So.
Yeah. It's so crazy you say this, and this is definitely not the path I wanted to go down, but
here we are.
But like, it's so true, because when I'm making diversity and inclusion something that is relevant to the person that I'm speaking to, I have to bring them back to the moment that they felt excluded, right? Like anytime that is. And it's usually a certain type of person that you have to do that to. But then you're like, this, when you felt that, this is what this segment of people, or person or gender or race feel like all the time when they walk into a room or in this particular situation. And it's almost like a light bulb goes off, because they're like, oh, I get it now. And it's just crazy to me that you just said that, because I've recently had to do that, and that the exclusion is what brought on the way that they now lead into being more inclusive in those situations.
That's so powerful. I'm now thinking about the DEI space, and how can you start with something like, tell me about a time you felt excluded. Or like you were in an out group. And all of us at some point, it doesn't matter, a lunch table when we were in primary school, or a meeting or whatever, we've all had those. It's just because of demographics, certain people are then have a greater propensity to feel like that more often, which is then like, they're the ones that are really losing out in our societies, our structures, our communities. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Kathy Duffy said something on a panel, I can't remember when it was, but it was at least 4 years ago. And she was like, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, she was like, it's only relevant, and I'm paraphrasing here. She was like, it only becomes relevant to people when it is personal to them. So it's not something
which
that
is so sad.
So sad. But she was like, you know, most people don't have a view on, you know, the LGBTQIA plus community until their daughter or their son or their cousin or someone they're close to comes out and says that they're a part of the community, or vice versa. Or, you know, your kid starts to date someone of the a different race or whatever that looks like. And then you're like, oh, wow, you're now hyper aware of what they're dealing like, because it's now personal to you. And I use that in examples all the time. And I always give Kathy, I give you your credit, girl. But it is something I use frequently, because when she said it, it was like a light bulb went off, because I'm like, people don't realize how something is, how what they say or their, you know, their tone towards something until it becomes personal to them. And then they become an advocate for things. It's it's crazy. Anyway, I digress, because we could
talk about this after
all day. It's so insane. I was someone who was here before you. We were like, let's not go down the rabbit hole of DEI, because we talk about equity all the time. And I was like, I'm not going to do this with Christie. And look where we are. Anyway, switching gears a bit, right? So you're phenomenal in everything that you do. Advisor, speaker, author. The book is amazing. Anyone who wants, you can get it on Amazon. We'll talk about that at the end. But I want to know.
Brown & Co. used to have them for
and
a
Brown
while.
& Co. had them. So yes, they did. I was in there the other day and I saw a few up in there, awesome. I believe. So that's great too.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about Christie, the wife. You tell me how you met your husband.
So we were both on the Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford. So Jamaica has one Rhodes Scholar per year, and Bermuda has one as well. And we actually met in Heathrow Airport, because he came up to Oxford the year before me, and 2 Rhodes Scholars are sent to get the incoming class that's coming over with the Americans. And he was sent to get us. So I met him in Heathrow, then the bus, and then I guess the rest is history. But there's a lot more messiness in between, but like any good love story.
Yeah. So where is he from? What does he do? Because you did mention about the practice. I know these things, but I want everyone else to know them.
Sure. So Ramon's from Jamaica, and he is an MD who did his DPhil at Oxford in immunology, looking at different cancer treatments. And then went on to do his general surgical residency in the US, started at Penn and transferred to Harvard and finished there, and then did his plastic surgery residency and training across Mass Gen and Brigham and Beth Israel in the Harvard program there. Yeah. And so we were living in Philly and Boston for a while, and then moved home and is the sole plastic surgeon on island. So he does a mix of everything from the reconstructive, the burns, the accidents, the skin cancers, the breast cancers, to the cosmetic, which are real and valid concerns for individuals, whether it be, you know, eyes, facelifts, whether it be injectables, whether it be body, whether it be, you know, mothers post childbirth. So it's a wide range.
Right range of things. Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned about having the practice together. Like, what was that always the goal of building this practice together, or did it kind of just like build?
So we knew with the structure of the economy. So it was interesting. Like, he had an offer to stay at Harvard, and I was desperate to raise our child at home. I think Bermuda is one of the most magical places on earth when it comes to childhood. And he said, yep, let's, you know, that's fine. And that he talked to some surgeons here, and there was a need around what he could provide. So we moved, and we did have the intention of setting up a practice, because most surgeons are in private practice in Bermuda, not hired by the hospital. And then they do some operations at the hospital. We did not have the plan of building Bermuda's first outpatient surgical suite. So we were here, and then because of certain different market forces or the need for more operative time, we ended up going down the route of trying to expand access to care on island and building a surgical suite as well as a practice. So that was the shift and change. And yeah, it was a wild few years. I mean, we've had that. That all happened during COVID. We had a young child. We did a 14 months long distance when we first had our child, because he was in his final year of residency. We moved like 10 times in 10 years or something. You know, there were multiple things. So it was complex and full on for a while. I definitely was a little bit MIA for a few years.
Yeah, definitely. I know, because I think when I first moved back, I don't think we knew each other at all. And then it was like you started coming back to
I was
Bermuda.
in hiding, full hiding for all those reasons.
Yeah. So how is marriage with, you have an amazing full career. He has an amazing full career. You have a young child. You're now 6.5 months pregnant.
Yeah.
Like, how has marriage been through all of that?
Hard. Like, I don't think that people talk about this enough. I think we see social media reels of like all of these anniversaries and celebrations and the beautiful moments. And that's not a critique per se of those reels, because you're not going to capture the fights or the times when you're crying or, you know, all of that.
Hey, wait a minute. Let's put up the camera. Yeah, I get it.
But it was difficult on multiple different fronts and for many, many different reasons and complex reasons. And it was interesting when Ramon proposed, I didn't know. And one of my best girlfriends did. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. Christie won't say yes, because he was asking her, like, has Christie ever talked about marriage, talked about a ring, and she was like, nope, never. Like, I just didn't, I think that there's so many ways to live in love. And I think I'm very open in my viewpoints around children, marriage, sexuality, any kind of social construction. And he definitely won me over when he said, instead of like, do you want to be my wife or do you want to get married? He said, do you want to be my life partner? And I'm like, yeah, you know, that sounds all right.
Yeah, it sounds all right.
But it is true. It's a partnership, and it's not always 50-50. It ebbs and flows. And there's beautiful moments, there's messy moments, there's hard moments, and you have to be committed. And I remember before I got married, asking my parents. So I said, like, look, you know, over 50% of marriages fail or end in divorce. Like, I think the stat was like 55 at the time. A larger percentage is unhappy. And so you only have like, if you're quantifying success as a happy marriage, it's a very small percentage. Would you ever take an investment risk like that? And my dad said to me, high risk, high reward. And my mom said to me, the best things in life take hard work, whether it be your health and your fitness, a meaningful and fulfilling career that gives back to a community, raising children. Like, none of those are easy options. And so I would say going into a meaningful relationship, partnership, whether that's marriage or not, know that it's going to take hard work. Like know that every day and every month and every year isn't going to be a great one. But I think that commitment's great. And I will say, to Ramon's credit too, like he definitely, in terms of my career, is like my biggest champion. I could tell him tomorrow, I'm moving to Timbuktu for 2 years to do a research project, or I'm going to go live in the Amazon and look at women and how they live and gender constructs. And he'd be like, okay, we'll figure it out. Like, I love that. And that has been huge.
Yeah. I was saying this, I don't know if it was to Laura or to someone else. And I said, when I interview women on the podcast, and usually everyone's very successful in their own right, I said they're either single or they have the most supportive partners.
Yeah.
There's no in between. There's no like, oh, he's kind of in my life, he kind of isn't in my life. It is either single, happy, thriving, or my partner is my biggest cheerleader, my biggest champion. He's there through whatever. Like there is no in between.
You should really like collate this data and like write on it at some point, because I think it's fascinating. And I think that trend is so true. Like I would prefer to be, by myself than not be with someone that is really supportive of my independence, my independent identity as well, which is so critical. Like I know for so many people, like wife and mother is a leading part of their identity. And I think that that's beautiful. And I think we're each unique. But when I think about my identity, those are one parts of a multifaceted identity. I'm still Christie, but those things, my interests, my passions, my pursuits, how I have fun, how I find joy, like the things I love. I am not only mother and wife. It is just one aspect. So,
but how do you, what would you say to someone or a woman who is a mom who didn't have the intention of becoming only wife, only mom? What advice would you give to her to how you've kind of how you have that approach of like, yeah, this is one facet of me, but I have all these other facets. Like I find that a lot of women become all consumed in motherhood in particular. And they don't really know how to come out of that to remember who they are. So how have you been able to do that? And what would you tell others?
So for some things, like one, I think that there's many ways to live in our individual identity and empowerment. And that may be staying home with your kids. It may be working while with your kids. And I think one thing we need to step back and think is that like we as women will empower each other through accepting each other's choices. And how I feel the most myself is not going to be how someone else feels the most themselves. So identifying themselves as mother first or wife first, that is, if that's what brings them joy and true grounding, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's absolutely fine. And I think we need to celebrate and not judge those choices. However, the one thing I will say is in my coaching practice, I do a lot of career-based coaching, but women come to me at major crisis and transition points. And there have been multiple women over the years that have reached out and said, I've, given up everything. I've been this one identity for years. I found out this about my husband. He's leaving me. And now I'm in crisis.
Yep.
And that has happened. I've worked with women that are 70. I've worked with women that are 30 something that has happened. So I would say for women in general, it is always important to know your identity outside of a job and title, outside of your partner, outside of your children, because the minute we peg our identity to one thing, you lose that job, you're in crisis. I had friends that when they stepped off of their varsity teams were in crisis in college because that was their whole identity in life. And so who is Deshay separate and apart from the titles and the roles? And what research shows us is actually men are better at creating identities that are separate and apart from one another, while women, we create identities of attachment in terms of our roles in our community, our families, to others, and in our jobs. And so I think that level of reflection is always important, and never to forget to ask yourself, what brings me joy, and what are those pockets of my identity that I can have separate and apart from all these other factors and influences.
No, I love that. And I love when you kind of break it down that way as well, it helps people to kind of flesh out even better, right? Because when I say like women who, find themselves in those spaces, like I have a lot of friends who have kids, and then, 1 minute it's just like, I was having a conversation with a friend a few months ago, and she was like, you asked me a question about what I like to do, and she's like, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I just don't remember. And it wasn't like, there was no judgment in the moment. I had to fix my face because I'm like, I know what you like. I remember what we used to do. You know what I mean? And then I had to fix my face because I was just like, this person who was, you know, her personality was just live and vibrant, and when she walked into a room, it was all consuming, has just basically just transformed a little bit for a little while, just needed to be reminded of the things that they like to do. Loves being a mom, loves being a wife, but just needed a reminder in that moment of who they were, because they just lost it in that moment and just wanted it back.
I see it all the time. And I think one thing to know is that life has ebbs and flows, and you may be consumed in a certain role in a moment, but that may not be forever. And the couple that we had dinner with last night shared with us, we asked them, like, how did you maintain your marriage? High-powered individuals during, and they were like, we didn't really see a lot of people during that period of time. We really focused on our family unit and X or Y. So know that it's not forever. But I do have a lot of women come in and tell me they've forgotten what brings them joy.
Wow.
Or ask them, like, what interests you, and they've forgotten. And it's only through going through the process of, like, asking them those questions that they're able to remember. But sometimes they're so clouded by their own lens. The most powerful thing is to ask a friend. So if I, even in moments for me that have felt dark, if I asked one of my friends, like, remind me what it was when you saw me the most joyful, when you saw me the most myself, when I was my best self. Sometimes that reflective best self exercise, it's something I put people through, actually, is the best way, because women can be so critical in self-assessment, but if we see ourselves through the eyes of others, it can be really, really powerful.
No, you're absolutely right. I had a friend who recently got a coach, and one of the first things in that step of that process was for that the coach to reach out to the people closest to them. And she asked a bunch of questions, and it was like pretty generic, nothing crazy. And I was like, can I add some additional color? And she was like, it wouldn't be me if I didn't. And she was like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, look, so-and-so is an amazing person, but the load that she bears is beyond anything you would ever imagine. Like, what she goes through every single day, the pressure that's on her shoulders, like, she doesn't have capacity to not be successful. So when you're coaching her into being a better person, keep in mind that that pressure she feels to be, you know, to overachieve and to do all these things, not just because she's an overachiever just to be an overachiever, because she doesn't have another choice. So just keep that in mind. Just give her some additional background. And she was like, I've never heard anybody do that before, right? Yeah. And so I called and told my friend, and I was just like, I'm so sorry if I overstepped, but I felt the need to give her that background, because I'm like, without it, she's going to give advice that doesn't really help. You know what I mean? So I totally agree with you about going to your friends, especially the ones you really trust, around who you are.
Yeah. And for anyone that's listening to this, there's actually a version of this online. I think it's out of University of Michigan, like the Center for Positive Organizations, but Adam Grant, who's an amazing organizational psychologist, talks about it. And it's called the Reflected Best Self exercise. And I've done different variations throughout the years, but it's incredibly powerful when you feel like you're in your own head and you're forgetting yourself and you're wondering, like, who am I anymore? And who do I want to be? It's a really powerful tool.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk about Christie the mom. Tell me about your beautiful son, who's so sweet and hilarious, by the way. I've watched your videos all the time. I don't think I've ever met him in person, but I feel like I know him. Tell me about Christie the mom. Like, did you always want to be a mom, or where did that shift? Or
I think I did when I was younger, and then there was a period where I questioned it when I was older, for sure. And my husband and I think we had been married around 6 years when I had him. So we also had a period of waiting. One thing I knew I didn't want to be was in a partnership with traditional gender roles where I would be like the sole caregiver, the sole, and there was a lot of pressures in our careers at that time, particularly because he was in residency working 120 hours a week. And so kind of finding that shared partnership in parenthood was really important to me. But yeah, our son is, you know, honestly one of the biggest joys of my life. And I'm really proud of the way that he interacts with others, but also like his wonder and awe about the world. One thing I've always prioritized since he could walk is being outdoors with him. And those simple moments away from screens, away from technology, away from the noise of the world, where you recognize the beauty. And now, you know, he's 7 and he runs outside. Oh my gosh, look at this sunset. There's this bird here. There's this, you know, that kind of stuff we can't take for granted. And I think adults, we'd be better off if we integrated more of that into our lives too.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So I guess I want to kind of staying on the mom side of it, but kind of taking a little pivot there. So your husband Ramon is Jamaican and he's Black, and you're in an interracial marriage, and you are raising a biracial son.
Yes.
How has that been for you guys? Was it something that's been difficult at times, with your knowledge on, DEI and all these different things? Like, has that been at an advantage for you? Like, how has it been being in an interracial relationship?
So funny. You can have all the knowledge on DEI in the world, and you can't intellectualize a personal experience, which is also why I can read all the books, but I'm still a white woman, and I'm not going to understand a Black woman's experience of the world in the same way. And I think remembering that is so important. Like, lived experience is very different than read experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that keeps me humble in my work all the time. In terms of our experience, I'd say we faced more challenges in Boston, in terms of just perception and interactions and kind of smaller microaggressions that existed on the day-to-day. And I do think it was interesting, though. Like, when I first started dating my husband, I was pretty private about it. And I shared with people, I'm dating this guy. He's a doctor. He's a Rhodes Scholar. Like, he's on the football team and golf team at Oxford. He's great. We've got a lot of shared values, commitment to family, commitment to country, like culture. And then I was like, and he's Jamaican. And, like, once it's like, and so it goes,
you get all the
like
accolades out.
And then, and so you kind of see that. And it was interesting, Ramon even coming to Bermuda and being like, yeah, I heard people call Jamaicans jump ups. Like, there's this, that was also a connotation around this, or connotations around fidelity, or, there's lots of cultural things. I think you have to stay true to your family unit and what you believe, but also understand, like I said, marriage and parenting is complex irrespective. When you add different ethnicities, different races, different cultures, different backgrounds, different countries, you have to be willing to take on those extra levels of complexity. And to me, this person was the person that was worth taking on for. But I also, so you'll know, I have a very mixed friendship group. And so I remember one of my girlfriends, longtime girlfriends, when I start also, Jamaican background, Bermudian, it was like, come here. I want to talk to you about how this is going to be perceived by this community. Right.
Yep.
And I had those people that had those real raw conversations with me early. And I said, thank you. And I get it. It's not going to change my decision around my partnership, but it's going to make me aware and more sensitive to those dynamics. And there were struggles, definitely, for sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, my grandmother's Jamaican, so I'm definitely aware of how even in Bermuda people perceive Jamaicans, and it can be very negative in times when it comes to that. So I totally understand that when it comes to Jamaicans. But Ramon's amazing, and we connected on being from Jamaica, and I'll never forget, someone was telling me a story. I can't remember where it was or where they were, and someone was talking about Jamaicans, and someone said, I would never date a Jamaican man. And Ramona had happened to be there, and my dad was there. And I don't know if you've met my dad before, but he, and I don't think they had officially met at the time. And my dad was very vocal about, answering that question to that person. And then him and Ramon kind of hit it off after that. And he was like, thank you. Like, I've heard so many things, and you're the first person I've heard that's kind of been like, you're an idiot, essentially, but in the nicest way possible. And kind of challenge the person's thinking, and so just stop generalizing based on 2 or 3 people that you've interacted with.
Definitely. And I think that goes to confirmation bias. We're always looking for that one person to confirm a bias we have versus anyone to counter it. The other thing is too, like we lived in Kingston, Jamaica. We still have a base there. Like, so many people look at me and they're like, Christie, this like blonde haired, blue eyed, like little island girl lived in Kingston, Jamaica. And it's like, that's my home as well. And integrating to there had its own real and very real challenges for me. And I love it. And it's such, I always want our son and now our daughter to have a really shared nationality, identity, ethnicity. And I think that you have to do that intentionally. And it doesn't happen without investing time and energy to being part of those cultures.
Yeah.
So that's incredibly important to me.
No, I think it's spot on. And I mean, there's never a perfect answer or perfect, you know, scenario situation, but I think you keep saying being intentional about it and learning the culture and knowing that you're going to see challenges. People are going to judge you. People are going to think certain things, but being intentional about being open to the different cultures, you know. And I also think, and this might be controversial to say, but I think living in Bermuda and being an islander, I think it is a slightly different, the approach to cultures. I think other cultures, when people are interracial, it's a little different, not completely, but I do think that there's a bit more acceptance with the music. It's similar. Like, it's not, you know, I mean, you're not crossing a lot of those barriers, but I love that you said what you said. And I'm hoping that we can package that down some way, because you often see people who, and no, I'm not going to say that. You often see how people who are in interracial relationships, and they automatically absolve themselves of being, you know, prejudiced or racist because their partner is a certain way, not realizing that if you are not intentional about getting to know that culture or that race or that ethnicity, you can actually still have some of those very same heavy biases. And
absolutely, it doesn't absolve you from anything. Nothing. Like, I'm still very aware, and I need people to call me out and keep me honest. Like, it doesn't matter if I've worked in this space and researched in this space for 17 years, whether I'm living it. We all are fallible, every single one of us. Yeah. And the greatest thing is having friendships. One of our mutual friends will share articles about who goes into whose setting and at what time, who's willing to be uncomfortable, and what are those settings like. And I've had lots of moments of major discomfort. Yeah, I can imagine, especially in Kingston. Yeah. I love Jamaica, by the way. It's one of my favorite places on the planet. I would go to Jamaica every year if I could. I probably should go back more frequently, but so just putting that out there. Definitely love Jamaica. But okay, so I mean, we're wrapping up on time here. It's going by really quickly, but I did want to take a moment to quickly talk about the book. And I know it's been out for like a little over how long now? 2002. So we just came up on the 2-year anniversary. Yeah. Which is crazy. It's crazy. Because it was the Acre event, was the launch event. I remember, and that feels like it was yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. So walk me through just quickly around, I guess, I feel like your entire career kind of led you to writing the book or wanting to write the book. But I guess, what was the original genesis of like beginning Boldly? So one thing was, it was never like, oh, I want to be an author or write a book. It was like, over the years, I've identified kind of these issues and challenges, and I have this amazing toolkit. And I ultimately have a choice of whether I continue to impart that knowledge and those tools on an organization by organization, client by client basis, which means your impact over your life is like this, or whether I invest my time and energy into kind of packaging a broader toolkit that gives everyone exposure to it at the cost of like $15 to $20 versus coaching, which is an elite group. So I really wanted to equalize access to this, which was like really the impetus behind it. But my whole thing is like, I feel like my mission, it's not even like my vocation or my career, is to like help women be bolder and braver in their careers and lives. And like, this is one of the ways to do it. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So what would you say is your favorite part of the book? And I know you wrote it and you did all the research, and I'm sure there's a ton of things in here, but if someone read the book, what would be the one thing you would want them not to forget? So there's a couple core concepts, but I'll tell you one concept that's really resonated and gotten traction, and something I have to remind myself all the time, is that we often, and we're told in, you know, popular media or discourse, that we need to be confident before making a bold move, before getting on a podcast, before sitting on a couch and being interviewed, before getting on a stage, before putting ourselves up for a role, before negotiating a promotion, before putting ourselves out there for love, to be vulnerable, whatever it may be. And the reality is, if we wait to feel confident, that elusive feeling will likely never come. Like, confidence is truly cultivated through action, and that action happens because of courage. Wow. So one of the biggest pieces of the book for me is choose courage over confidence. So for part of my life, I was waiting to feel confident before these things, and that put things on hold. I see my clients doing that all the time. But if we stop telling women to wait to feel confident and we say, look, you just need to be courageous in the absence of confidence. And then confidence will be the byproduct or output. That is so powerful.
Yeah.
And so next time someone's like trying to go up for that role, interviewing for that scholarship, trying to take that exam, whatever it may be, like I said, putting themselves out there for love or changing careers or moving countries, just know that you don't have to feel ready or confident. You just need to be courageous in the absence of it.
I love that. Anyway, this book is great and everyone should read it. And I wish we need another session to talk about the book and all the things that we got from it, but we'd have to do like everyone has already read the book, or we'll go from there. But no, I totally agree with you on that. And I think, I can't remember the exact study or the saying about it, but it was like the average woman waits when she's applying for a job. She looks and goes through the job description to make sure she hits everything on the job description. But a man will go in and just see one or two things, like, yeah, I can do that, and go and apply for it. And it's pretty much the same kind of concept around that.
So I think it's like women feel like they have to have 100% of the qualifications and men have 60. And so the thing is, if we continue to function in that way as women, the gender gap is always going to persist. So I always encourage my clients, like I'll help them with like resumes and interviews and everything. And I'm like, put yourself out there. And we always say like, we always ask ourselves, well, why me? Well, ask yourself, why not me? Or what's the worst that could happen? Ask yourself, what's the best that could happen? Or why? Ask yourself, why not? And there's these powerful mental shifts that I encourage in terms of like flip the scripts that are really, really powerful in terms of like ensuring that we're just courageous, even when our inner critic is so loud, which I've dealt with, you know, throughout my life.
Yeah, same. Yeah, totally agree. Especially when you're shifting careers or you're taking bold moves, that self-doubt, that, you know, a bit of imposter syndrome creeps up. And I feel like it's more in women than men. I could be wrong, but I feel like that just from the people that I work with often. But especially if you're taking those bolder moves, it can definitely be a bit more challenging.
Yeah. And I think one thing, and I think you've heard me say this before, but I think we need to normalize those feelings. Like, I think we think, oh, I'm fearful, I don't feel ready, these might be signs that I shouldn't go for it. No, I feel fear every single day. I feel fear if you're not feeling fear, you're not loving deeply enough, taking risks deeply enough, you're not investing in your career enough. And I think we need to normalize, like, my goal is never for people that read the book to be fearless, but to have the tools to take bold action in the face of fear. And so that's why this concept of courage, it's going to eliminate your fear. It's going to, instead of focusing on confidence, you're going to focus on being courageous in the face of fear. And that's what's powerful.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. Oh, I want to talk about it more. Okay, but when we start thinking final thoughts, right, after everything we've kind of talked about today, I definitely want you to leave something with my listeners, especially the women, around if we're talking to a woman and she's trying to balance life and family and work and their own personal ambitions, what advice would you give them, or takeaways would you give them about embracing uncertainty and taking those risks?
So the way that I think about it, and I've thought about it kind of in my book and my research and with my clients, is we often don't want to take a risk because we don't have a formula for risk taking. We feel like we're being told to jump off of the mountain blindfolded or paraglide when we've never paraglided before. And risk taking doesn't need to feel like that. Like, we can have a method for risk taking. So part of the focus of the book was giving you a method to assess risks and also to prepare for the range of outcomes. I'm not saying there's never going to be a risk that has a bad outcome. I'm going to say that the outcome that you don't desire might actually propel you further than you ever imagined. And so I would say, like, get the support network and get the tools that you need to actually take intentional risks. The time, and I go back to that intentionality. And sometimes when we feel exhausted, I work with women that feel stretched across everything. We don't take that time out to be intentional, but that's truly the gift that you can give yourself. And so knowing that, I talked about this in the book, but it was years ago, I was speaking at a global women's conference for the economy and society in Normandy, France. And there was this woman on the CEO panel that I was interviewing, and she was in heels, and she got up on the stage and she said, if I have to get from here over to here, how would I get there? And everyone was starting. She's like, I can't have help. I can't have a ladder. I can't whatever. And we have no idea, right? And she actually eventually, when everyone was stumped, took back steps and ran up and then made the jump, which she wouldn't have been able to do if she just, you know, bunny hopped from that spot. Right. And so her message was like, the risks that we've taken that we think have negative consequences actually and we look like we're going back, actually teach us more and propel us further than a consistent choice to play it safe where we can't bridge that gap. And so I would just say that as long as we've always got the mindset of like, what did we learn from this and how can we harness it for greater growth and forward motion, that, you know, there is no wrong move in that way.
I love that. That's amazing. Okay. And then when we think of what you want to be remembered for, right? So it's the final question on the podcast. Everyone that comes on me always asks this. Like when you think, and I always say it, and people who listen frequently are probably like, we get it, Deshay, when they're no longer here a long time from now. You know, what do you want to be remembered for? When they say Christie Hunter Arscott, like what do you want people to say about you? What is that memory?
That's so hard. I can tell you what's most rewarding and meaningful for me now. It's not the awards for the book or for my work or international recognition or being published in different places. It's those messages that come into my inbox that were like, you know, I'm in a bad marriage and I left because of your words on this, or I put myself up for the promotion and your words inspired me, or I'm coming back from mat leave and I got a new title and a new raise that reflects my work. And I would have never, ever, ever, you know, put myself and advocated for myself, or I've just advocated for someone else that is underrepresented. And I'm not like, those are the things that are the most meaningful moments. And they exist in my inbox, not in the public eye or in those interactions with my mentees that are informal on the day to day. And so I think it's almost like the accumulation of that in terms of being remembered. Like if there's women that I inspire to be bolder and braver in love, in their careers, in life, in leadership, like that's what I'd want.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm glad that you said that around in love and leadership and whatever, because we think about this in a career sense in the Begin Boldly, but you can take a lot of these principles and, you know, put them into your personal life, into how you kind of navigate your life, period. And I think that that's really what's a good factor about the book as well.
Definitely.
Yes. Anyway, Christie, we could keep going, but thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I can't wait to meet baby girl once she gets here.
I can't wait to be on the other side of this. So yeah.
It'll come soon enough. Yeah. It'll be fast. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. November will come quick.
Not that I'm counting, right?
Yeah. But thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Deshay.
All right, guys, we just had an amazing conversation with Christie Hunter Arscott, who is the author of Begin Boldly. Make sure you head over to our sponsor, Brown & Company, so you can head over to the bookmark there and you can purchase the book, or you can head over to Amazon and you can purchase her book there as well. If you want to know more about Christie and any of the services that she does provide, make sure you head over to her website, christiehunteраrscott.com. As always, thank you for spending some time with me today on Hustle Her Podcast.